Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Salt Mine. It is now episode number 7, coming off of week number 6 of the NACL. Back to our regular 36 game schedule. My name is Gordo. I am joined, as usual, by Nyarko and TDS. We are maintaining the 3-man squad here, probably for the rest of the split at this rate. We'll see. Could always be some surprises, as there was with Cubby last week. But coming into this week, it is just going to be the same core group here. And we are going to open up after another fun week of NACL with our Player of the Week discussion. I'm going to let you guys start us off.
Yeah, for me, I want to open up with a big congratulations to all the people that had stocks in Golden Guardians. I think that is something we're going to be talking about a little bit more in depth later on, but I do want to focus in on them. I think that they're one of the 2 or 3 teams that I think deserve to be highlighted with one of their players here in this spot. But for me, I think that I'm probably going to go for Young there in the mid lane. Very impressive showing in all those games. I actually think their least impressive plays were up against FlyFam, but at this point, I am going to weigh games against provisional teams, especially provisional teams that are struggling as much as FlyFam. Although they did get their second win this week, probably as like a lower tier, less impactful as to my overall feeling as to how they perform. And elsewhere, I think that they were very, very impressive, instrumental in their one win against Dig C, and just very consistent throughout the whole week.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely have to give big credit to Young for the LeBlanc game up against Dig C for sure. That game in particular really stands out to me as what kind of propels Golden Guardians for me back into the conversation for, some of these real contender challengers teams. They fall behind in both top and bot in the early game. Spawn and Diamond get the push in. XU sets up really nicely to get them ahead. And then I think Hoon I think it's a solo kill against Concept. If not, it's assisted by XU, but Hoon definitely gets ahead as well. And when you're losing both side lanes, that's a spot where a lot of teams in this league just end up crumbling. You just lose access to Dragons, you lose access to Rift Heralds, and there's just nothing you can do. But Rosethorn and Young, they manage to play it through mid lane. They call up Prismal for some of those roams as well to start 3-manning on towards Insanity. They develop a big lead for Young, and they let Young carry it the rest of the way. So, especially for a rookie to this league, that's super impressive to me.
Yeah, and Rosethorn is actually my second in line for a nomination. I think that they also played fantastically in all of these series, insanely high KP and a really, really good record history on these facilitator-ish champions, I think is the best way to put that, the Sejuani and Maokai in particular. But I think that they've been kind of on the same game plan all season, and what I really like to see this time around was Young putting on the carry pants to a degree with a wide variety of assassins and mages, so that's why I want to focus on them a little bit more. But overall, I think that core mid-jungle continuity has been a fantastic boon for Golden Guardians, and something I hope to see more of as we are pretty deep into the season now, but still seeing changes out of that team.
And I'm going to back the Young player of the week. It was my player of the week since the start of while watching the games from GGC. I think that if feels kind of similar to TLC in the same in the band that not in the vein of how they play, but in how important, how crucial it is for their mid laner to be doing good. Because even though I do think that the silence for GGC have been working a little bit better, I think particularly Concept has stepped it up in the sense that he doesn't feel like that big of a liability compared to where he was at the start of the season. I think that he's becoming a little bit more consistent in some of the games that they play. Like even death-wise, I think that he has gone a little bit down compared to where we started the season. So I think that the silence have stepped it out quite a bit. But Young has been consistently, to me, the best performing player on their team, doing a really good job at being the strong point, the focal point, and one of the main carries, if not the main carry for the team. I think between an array, you can argue who is the main carry, but he has been reading so fundamental. I think because the team is functioning well, you see when Young is just like able to get the free space and pop off like he was doing with the LeBlanc game, which I particularly think he saved the game and he won the game. Because there were instances where they essentially threw and Young's LeBlanc just saved the some of the issues for GGC in that game.
Is this the first time that we've had 2 people agree on a player of the week, making them a super player of the week?
I feel
I think didn't TDS and I agree on Eminus in week 1?
Yeah, probably
Oh, true.
one of those.
Yeah, something like that. I'm sure there's one or two in there if we combed back through all the
Probably.
episodes. I'm not gonna make it the 3-peat though.
No, fair. Well, maybe a collective agreement on a player means instant promotion to the LCS, given our track record is apparently vaguely correspondent with that dynamic.
Yeah, I thought Young looked good in LCS. To be honest, I think he's on the short list for sure if he can keep this kind of form going.
And I think it's also that one of the reasons why GGC started kind of like weird, because Young was between LCS and Academy. So they didn't really have a lot of time to mesh together, I think, in that sense. So when Young just made the full stay in Academy, it really just showed how important he was for GGC. So I think that it really goes to show that even though he was able to perform in Academy, he in LCS, I think that because of the split time that he was throwing there, probably affected some of the performance that the overall team was facing.
For sure, for sure. But as I said, I'm not going to go with Young this week. I am going to go for, and this feels like it's kind of splitting it between two players, but I think I have to give it to Winsome. Because Fly Challengers, they get their full roster this week, and they look like a totally different beast. They had a fantastic series against 100 Thieves Challengers and a fantastic series against TL Challengers. Both teams, I think, that were looking pretty good. 100 Thieves coming in looking pretty good. Have had a good couple of weeks in a row, especially with since Unforgiven's hit his stride. TL Challengers, I was bad-mouthing last week, but I think all in all had a very good week this week, up until they hit the wall that is Flyquest Challengers, and they just look absolutely excellent since Winsome's arrived. I do believe Masu also got local. He's no longer playing on ping, so Masu arrived to the Flyquest facility this week, and you can immediately see that in his play. He's like starting to pick Ezreal now. Looks great on that pick. Has a couple of great games in there as well. But I just feel like the macro game for this whole Flyquest roster just kind of switched up on a dime, especially in one of the games against 100 Thieves. They are behind and then get back in with a solid Baron call. They just make good roams around the map. And I feel the need to attribute a lot of that to Winsome. He is the piece of the puzzle that wasn't here previously, and this whole team just seems to click the second he arrives.
And I think that Flyquest is definitely the other team to highlight for the week, and also kind of runner-up in my set of nominations for Player of the Week. There's a lot of candidates coming in from that roster, and while I do have to highlight Golden Guardians, I am not torn up whatsoever about hearing Winsome breaking up the unanimous decision to push for Golden Guardians player. I think that for me, Yuji is also in the discussion. The macro game from Flyquest has been fantastic this past week, and I'm sure we'll get a little bit more into detail about that as we have a whole section dedicated to this team. But it kind of feels like they're playing Spurs basketball in the way. It's like aesthetically a very pleasing style of League of Legends that they're currently, I think, helming, and a lot of that comes down to very fluid rotations and a really, really good focus on pain points across the map. So for me, that's kind of why I wanted to highlight Yuji, being the jungler that is your job kind of in a nutshell, being brought to the rest of the team. But that could also just mean that these individual laners, these supports, these ADCs, they're all together kind of creating an environment where people are able to play off of Yuji and play off of Winsome in this case. So perhaps it is the case that they are the most deserving of the nomination. But yeah, overall, I think that these are really good picks.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm willing to dive a little deeper into the Fly rabbit hole here if we want to, because like my pushback on that would be, the macro play looks so much better this week, and I just, Winsome's the obvious change there. This is a squad that, building off of where they were at last year, right? They've kept the majority of their team. They kept the Philip, UG, Spyrax core. Obviously, Philip moved up to Flyquest main during the summer split, but those three had been together previously and were kind of their academy core coming into the 2022 season. And that roster pretty explicitly ran through Diamond as the shot caller, who they let go of in this past offseason to move on over to Dignitas. So that kind of leaves open this gap, right, for shot calling that I do get the sense that Winsome is filling in for, right? I recall some interviews and discussions where they talked about Winsome's shot calling voice, both over on the Flyquest main team and now on this Challengers team. And, as I said in my spiel for him, I think it looks like night and day since he showed up to this team. Obviously, seems to be a sizable upgrade over Ketong. I was giving Ketong a lot of credit for his performance, and I think he performed well enough that he's likely earned a spot on one of these 16 teams come next split, but if not next year. But, Winsome just appears to take this team to a whole nother level.
Yeah, I feel like the main difference that I spot with like Ketong and Winsome is that it feels like Ketong was much more like push and pull in some instances, or on and off in some instances, where it felt like he was doing really good things, but at the same time he kind of did really random things in some of the situations of the game. And the macro sense wasn't really being pulled by him. Like you can see, like you were pointing out, the difference between the macro that Flyquest challengers were showcasing before and after Winsome is really like so different. I was watching obviously because I do like a lot of the TLC games. I try to see if there's improvement to try and put me back in where I believe in them. But in some of the games, or in the games where they played against TLC, like the movements that Flyquest challengers were doing were so smart that it not only denied the main factor that I think from TLC was important, which is APA or APA, but at the same time they were finding angles that were so smart to just give their win conditions even more value and the like. And I think a lot of that really what did come with the change of Winsome. To the disdain of me, because I didn't have any belief in this team. Like they are doing really, really good. And I think that now in their main roster, like if there's any more like upgrading, or not upgrading, but like improvement in their performance this last week, I would be willing to say that they are candidates to end up going for the victory at the end.
Definitely agree there, but I do also want to say, and this was edging towards, coming into Monday's games, I was very prepared to have APA on my short list for Player of the Week. On the subject of TL Challengers, and to earn me some brownie points with TDS, the performance of APA this week was fantastic. I mean, I think he was a big standout player this week for the whole league. He's got these unique picks that most folks aren't willing to play. The Ziggs, draws bans, is very effective when they pick it. The team plays around it well. The Cassiopeia as well is the other one that he's really been willing to bring out a lot. And even the Ari, it's not like it's a major meta pick. It's not like it shows up draft in and draft out. But for APA, it's the kind of thing you need to consider there. And even though TL Challengers drops 3 games this week, I think they have a very difficult schedule. And I think they kind of exceed my expectations on that. And a lot of that's through APA. I mean, I think he performs very well against EG Challengers, of course, is very critical in that 2-0. Is very critical in their win over Dig Challengers, which, even though there's a slight roster change, I still don't think you can write off a win against Dig Challengers. I think that's a big accomplishment for any team in this league, except for maybe C9. And even in their losses, his Ari game, when they lose to Dig Challengers, he's the only person doing anything in that game. Like, he is diving the back line, he is getting picks on spawn solo, even while his team is losing the game, and they're just so far behind that it doesn't matter.
Like that game, the Ari game to me really showed what I have, or what I see in TLC, in the sense that, for better or for worse, it's APA trying to make the plays happen to carry the team out. And it was shown as well in the Cassiopeia, like they give the resources to him, he has the damage to be able to deal with them. The Ari is another way to try and carry the team, not in the sense that he will deal the damage, but he was trying to find those picks and trying to get through the back of the team so that they can have a little bit more space. But and it's going to be such a consistent issue, at least in my eyes, because I think it was Kobe that said it last week, right? It's such a bot lane heavy meta that if the bot lane isn't having like a really big impact right now, and the top lane is not necessarily finding a lot of value as well, then you don't have a lot of chances to try and make your team shine through. And APA is really trying to shine through. I think that for better or for worse, he goes a little bit too far sometimes, but if he doesn't go for those plays, the team doesn't really find any angles to try and carry it through.
Yeah, and by the way, he does it again in their first game against TL Challengers when he's on the Akali. He's, again, the only person doing anything in that game, and Yeah, as you say, they're in some of these games they are not getting a lot of opportunities to make anything happen, but APA makes those opportunities happen. I've my stocks on APA have grown several sizes this week. And I'm very excited to see as this team starts to amp up for playoffs. You know, Cubby called it out last week, right? This is a team that a lot of folks expect to get better in best of fives. They're very well coached. They prep very well for these playoffs. The TL Academy system has a long history of middling regular seasons with deep runs in the playoffs. I think this team has what it takes if they can, if Bradley can like return to some of his previous form, and if APA can maintain this form, then I think they could very easily launch themselves into one of the more dangerous solo lane duos in the league.
I think there's actually like thinking about it because talking about those teams that are looking like they are prepping or pumping up themselves, like just to touch on another one that I kind of want to talk a little bit more. 100C. I think it's one of those teams that feels like yes, they may have lost a couple of series here and there, but they're really just looking like they are going up in some of the sense. Like I think Sniper is one of the players that I feel like has been looking better and better with the passing of the weeks. Obviously, Unforgiven has shown that he probably is the best AD carry in the league so far. Like I think skill wise, he really just looks so over a lot of the already carries. And this team feels like it's meshing well enough now that come playoffs, I would also say like they are coming to the expectations that we had initially in the season because I think everyone had them second, if I'm not wrong, on our tier list. So I feel like they're slowly coming together in the sense that I feel like they're going to be a really, really dangerous team. And I'm really liking what Sniper has been doing recently.
Yeah, definitely. If you count recently as the game against Wildcard, right? The games against Wildcard, Sniper just pops off on the Olaf and certainly had a very flashy performance there up against Moose Hater, who has been a pretty solid rock throughout most of the split. I don't know what it is about this 100 Challengers roster, though. I agree, Sniper looks fantastic in a lot of lanes. He gets a lot of, he comes out of a lot of lanes, I think, looking very good. I think Yukino continues to impress me. I think Unforgiven's one of the better AD carries in the league. And I think Prince and Destiny, or not Prince, Pretty and Destiny, wrong
Yeah.
PR player. Pretty and Destiny, I think, are everything that was promised. And yet, for some reason, this team is just not the best team in the league, right? Like, you would think with all of those opinions coming together and holding true that this team would be much better than 17-9, but they're 17-9. So I don't know. I just can't quite place my finger on it. Curious to hear your guys' thoughts. I don't know why this 100 Thieves Challengers team doesn't feel like it's coming together to me.
It really is a weird position to be in because I'm kind of with you on that, Gordo. Like, even now, if I were to redo my power rankings, sure, things would shift around. But when I look at the individual players on Challengers and I look at their performance throughout the season so far, I still would put them higher than their record is to be believed. I'm not really sure what the deal is, but I think that I got a little bit more clarity on the situation from the Fly Challenger series where they got 2-0'd. It feels as if they're a team that have internalized a lot of concepts about playing from behind in terms of they go safe, they look for scaling, they look for individual picks, but they oftentimes are just kind of dropping games if they lose tempo early off the back of not having a way to get leverage for big comebacks in a game. And so they slowly get bled out over time. When they do get ahead early, when they do have very stable lanes, they're able to play off of their star power and their surprising amount of coordination, I think, to take some really, really impressive victories. You look at their games against Wildcard, you just see utter lane domination on all fronts. I think that was a series where, in particular, Unforgiven and Destiny were just a fantastic duo. But I think that it really does come down to what happens when they could play from behind, and the volatility of League of Legends, particularly at the NACL level, I think means that there's a lot of situations where you do have to play from behind, even if you are an elite team.
It sounds like they are the quintessential LCS team. Like they go for compositions that theoretically should work out, even if they go longer. Like they don't feel that proactively risky in a lot of senses as well. And if a team knows how to bleed you out, they will bleed you out. And 100 Thieves will give them the chance to get bled out because they don't respond as aggressively as some other teams, which I think it's one of the different. It's one of the reasons why I think this team could probably work in LCS, but I think in challengers they will struggle because team in challengers are much more crazy, if I put it in a way, than LCS teams.
And I do think that this is a team that will perform better in best of fives and best of three scenarios because they have that air of sensibility about them, especially when they're in desperate situations. But honestly, at the same time, TDS, I love the fact that NACL teams are going to play crazy. That's what I come to this league for. And I actually think that one of the big complaints that we've had about some of these provisional teams is that they don't play crazy enough. They don't actually try to take risks whatsoever. And this just leads to a lot of non-games for them that are kind of locked in as losses from minute one. In particular, this is a complaint that I have about CLG Faith, but I will only name drop them once because otherwise I don't think there's a whole lot notable to say about that team this week.
Officially the sole holders of last place, by the way,
True.
with that Fly Fam win this week. I'm very sorry, Nyarko, and any other CLG Faith believers out there. But I do think that's a good point about volatility for sure. I think Dig Challengers and C9 Challengers, they've been some of the most aggressive teams in the league and some of the most successful teams in the league at the same time. And I also think that I agree that 100 Thieves Challengers, maybe we aren't giving the respect they deserve coming into these best of threes and best of fives, because it feels like what's really dragging down their record here is that they are dropping games to middle of the pack teams that maybe some of these other top tier teams wouldn't drop games to. So they've dropped games to AoE, they've dropped games to EG, and they dropped a game to Immortals as well. And if you just take those three games, who are all teams that I think we would unanimously put as lower than 100 Thieves on the totem pole, if you take away those three losses, then 100 Thieves is now tied with Dignitas at second. That would put them at 20-6. So maybe it really is just those few couple of games that are swinging things here.
At the same time, we're at a point in the NACL season, Gordo, where things like Flyquest Challengers are middle of the pack teams, but there's honestly so many narrative turnarounds and whatnot that makes it difficult to look at these standings and say, yeah, this is a good read on the metagame. Well, not the in League of Legends metagame, but the inter-team metagame moving on into playoffs. So that's something I really want to keep an eye out for. I wonder if 100 Thieves Challengers are, in fact, dropping the games to the teams that are really going to rally. Immortals probably not going to be the one that rallies, especially given their drop to Fly Fam. But some of these other teams right there, CLG Challengers, I think, honestly, looks relatively solid as well. There's a lot of things to play off of going deeper on in, and that's one of the reasons why NACL has really taken my full attention in past weeks.
For sure. That and the podcast obligation.
Yes.
But...
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was a great in-depth discussion. Got a little off the rails for Player of the Week, but that's good. Like chatting about these teams. Let's talk a little bit about our sister league here, the LCS proper. They're equals. They're not definitely not a major minor league situation, but talking about the big leagues, talking about LCS, we got some new promotions to LCS this week. Let's take step by step on our LCS related points. Tomo and Balulu both moving up. Tomo, we've gotten to see a little bit of in LCS. He got his promotion last week, unfortunately announced after we recorded our episode because, Dignitas is pretty slow on those announcements. Every single split. Calling him out here. But what do we think of Tomo? How did Tomo do this week?
Well, first of all, I think the expected teams did some of the expected changes, right? Like nothing out of the ordinary. They didn't bench Jensen. They played 80 carries, which I think it was a more sensible thing. And overall, I think Tomo did perform better in the sense that I thought that he wasn't going to die randomly in lane. Like I think Spawn has been. Like Spawn always feels like it's with a deficit coming off of lane phase. Now, not necessarily always his fault. I think that a lot of that falls into the team. But in instances where the team didn't have like an issue early on, he was with a deficit compared to Tomo. Like I think Tomo was pretty consistent in that regard, and I think he performed well overall. Like he putting damage really well, playing really not necessarily forward, but he wasn't that afraid of trying to walk forward to try and get damage done. And I think that's a positive sign for Dignitas. Obviously, he got the first victory, so you have to say that a positive change did happen there. But I don't think it was necessarily just the change with Tomo. Like I think other things did come through. So I'm not like I don't think Tomo was necessarily the biggest upgrade compared to Spawn, but he certainly did feel a little bit more like safer in that sense.
So, my armchair GM take on this Dignitas move, right, is I just don't understand what the vision and goal is here from moving up just Tomo. Like if I'm in charge of Dignitas, right, my thought would be move up the whole academy team because you've got the best academy team, move down the whole LCS team, and then you get a round robin with your academy team. It does not matter how many games you win because you are 0-9, and you're not going to rattle off an 8-1 second round robin to make playoffs. It's not going to happen. You still only have 6 teams in playoffs for spring, so you need to be like 8-10 or better to make it. And especially with how close like the 6th, 7th, 8th spot is with TL and TSM and CLG all looking way better than you, it's just not going to happen. You're not going to rattle off the 8-1 second round robin with Tomo in the team and make playoffs. There's zero chance of that occurring. With that in mind, who cares what happens in this second round robin? I would say give the whole academy team a shot, and then you also get, you get additional rounds of academy play. You get to play the best of 2s now, and then the best of 2 playoffs with your main roster. See how that goes. See, who's totally checked out from the 0-9 and who's still actually looking like they can perform. And then take all of that knowledge that you gain from seeing, players like Insanity and XU back in the LCS who haven't been in the LCS in a while and definitely not in a situation like this, and build yourself a competitive team for summer from that knowledge that you gain. I don't know. I'm pretty out on like separating Tomo and Diamond here after they've been playing very effectively together all split. Like at least bring them up as a duo or something to get a real fair test here. I feel like Tomo is getting put in such a bad situation that there's just no way that Dignitas gains anything meaningful from this change.
Well, I think that the argument here could be that they are thinking of summer, but they are thinking of changing the bot lane. Like, and I mean, like taking apart both Spawn and Bifrost, but not with Diamond. They want another support. They are testing out if Tomo would be a fit for the normal team, and then they bring another support in, like completely apart, different from Diamond. And I could see that being their argument as well. Like, test it out here with Tomo, see how he meshes with the rest of the team, and then you're bringing another support completely apart from both of them. Which I don't think it's necessarily that bad in idea, but I also don't think that your biggest problem is going to be bot lane, if I'm honest. So I would look into other spaces as well.
In a purely abstract sense, there's a good argument for very dramatic shifts with Dignitas at the LCS level right now. And I'll come clean. I don't watch LCS all that frequently. I keep up to date with the records of teams, but I don't really get to see how they perform with boots on the ground, et cetera, et cetera. So I have no reading as to what would happen in Gordo's sense, where you have a full transition and swap between the academy roster or the challengers roster and the mainline roster, how those teams would fare in each other's shoes. But while I believe that there's a lot of interesting dynamics and really, really good developmental groundwork that could be laid in that kind of dramatic move, Gordo, it's something that's a little bit harder to warrant to a venture capitalist bro or something like that in terms of what is best for the long-term health of the team. There's clearly going to be a dramatic adjustment necessary in terms of the mental game for both the Dignitas mainline roster, who is struggling in terms of wins and losses. And we've already seen what that kind of does to organizations over the course of an entire season. And Dig C being poised to take the NACL, being put into an uncomfortable scenario where they clearly could even underperform versus the mainline Dig roster right now. I think that's clearly a possibility, unless you guys have a rebuttal to that from just seeing how these teams play. Makes me kind of worry about the possibility for something that big to happen, and therefore there's a very unenviable position that Dig is in as a whole. But right now, there's also the calculus of, hey, maybe we get something back. Maybe there's brownie points in just winning the NACL, and that'll help us in the long run.
Yeah, that's fair. And to be fair, if this were any other organization, I would just say you shouldn't care about winning NACL. You should care about your LCS team being better, because that's where all the eyes are. That's where you really make your franchise money. If anything, the NACL is probably a like a lost leader for you. You know, you're there to build up talent for your LCS team, where the real popularity and value is to be gained. And the NACL is just a means to an end from that perspective. With that said, Dignitas is, I guess, the one org that doesn't believe that, because they built their Challengers team to win NACL, and they want to win NACL. So maybe that factors into it a bit as well. Let's talk about Balulu a bit. Balulu just announced as a promotion here for Immortals. Ablaze Olive going to be stepping away from competitive for a while, per the announcement. So let's start by chatting about Balulu. What do you think of his season so far? What do you think about him moving up to Immortals?
Uh, Pretty. I think we would say predictable, to say the least. Like you did call it here, and I was 100% with you in that. I don't think I said it, but I was 100% with that in you with you on that, because I do think that he was looking really, really good in academy, and I think in challengers, and I think that he was going to be one of the pieces that Immortals could look into. And I think that for the record, for what they need, uh, adding Bolulu is not a bad choice. Like he can still salvage some of the season. I don't think they are going to, or the split. I don't think they are going to get to that sixth or fifth spot, but they are going to be a team that at least I can see fighting it out, especially with Bolulu. And I feel like this was the right choice. I will say though, I feel kind of bad for Ablaze, and if something outside of the game was affecting his performance, then it's kind of understandable now why he wasn't really performing up to what we may have seen a little bit like last year or the year before that.
Guys, Balulu lost to Fly Fam this week.
You lose a game to FlyFam sometimes. It's not
Sometimes.
Immortals Challengers, which is not a good team, lost to FlyFam this week. Balulu was there, but he is only 20% of that roster, and that was not a Blaze hard carry. Let's be honest with ourselves here.
Yeah, that is true.
I do think that Balulu is one of the better players on the Immortals roster. And once again, I am talking about this relatively blind, especially compared to you guys who are more enfranchised with the LCS as a whole. So maybe this transition will go smoother than I expect it to, but I don't believe that Balulu is suddenly going to strike at the heart of some of the premier mid laners in the LCS. I don't think that they're on the MNS level even. So from there, I don't know how they're going to perform. I think that if we're going to go back to this optics discussion that we also had surrounding Dignitas, there's a worry that I have that Balulu's numbers are going to tank just because they're up against a much higher caliber of competition in the LCS. And from then you see Immortals in kind of an awkward spot with what exactly they're going to do regarding bringing in a new mid laner as well to the Challengers roster. So that's a dynamic I want to keep my eye out for, but I'm not going to read too much more into the situation just because of lack of context on my end.
Yeah, no, I do agree that this is not like Balulu's not a world beater, right? He's gonna probably roll up and be mid to low tier in LCS. I think this makes a little bit more sense from an Immortals perspective, though. When Immortals is a team where I think Ablaze Olive was kind of a clear weakness. I think Revenge has been having a pretty good split. I still believe in Kenvi to some degree. I think he shows some promise, and I think Fleshy looks quite good as well. Tactical, I think has to be watching his back for Wixie a little bit. But the rest of the team, I think, has performed pretty well. They've gotten a couple of wins in LCS already, and this is a team where I could see, a good performance from Balulu could push them into, contending for maybe an outside playoff spot. Maybe you end up better than like your CLGs and your Team Liquids, your teams that are underperforming, and that could realistically kind of push them up to that next level. I will say, in a week where PR bullshit is hot on everyone's tongues, oh boy, what a glorious coincidence that the worst performing player on Immortals main team, who is backed up by the best performing player on Immortals Challengers team, just happens to take a voluntary break right after the first round robin ends and everybody starts making substitutions. Just love that for them. Good job, guys.
It was the easy way to get good points, I feel like. So, hey, all power to them. At least there's no bad, not bad faith. There's no bad blood. It feels like, at least from the outside, compared to other things.
Yeah, I'll just say I think I don't think there's bad blood, right? I think it's probably ABO is probably told he's being benched and just decided he didn't want to play challengers. That's my internal belief here. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know, it just feels that way. It feels like we've been calling this change on this show since like week 2, and now it just happens to be a voluntary decision from a Blaze Olive. I don't know, I'm a little skeptical.
Yeah, which is from every part. Like, the team can take this decision because the team is the one that puts, like, the team has the right to do this, and the player can say also, I don't want to play this. So I feel like the best for all is that we just give our space, and that's it. Like, I think it works out for everyone. So
for sure,
that's why I don't think there was bad blood. Like, I feel like more so than Blaze Olive voluntarily taking himself out, I feel like it's more so the team being okay with giving him the space to take this decision, which I think it's good as well. Like, the decision after being taken off the team, by the way. Like, I think that's fair in all instances. And for Immortals, I think it was the logical transition, not necessarily because like there's no like better changes that they can go for. I feel like probably there was, but it's also the easiest transition that they can go for at the time of the change, and the one that will take less of a hit on their organization. They don't have to spend anything more because they already have a Lulu, so it's easy to just bring him up, and then whoever ends up taking the spot in their Immortals Challengers doesn't have to be that pricey either. So not a bad decision in my eyes. And then I think that overall, and I think it was Robert that was saying it, as long as you're 6th, you already did an amazing job at this with this Immortals team. If you get 6th and a place in playoffs, I feel like Balulu outperformed what I was expecting from him, because I don't think they are going to reach playoffs. I think they will get an opportunity, but I don't think it's going to happen. And similar to the Tomo idea, this could be just setting up for some more changes coming into the summer season, where it's more important to try and secure the World's playoffs. Like, you try and get Balulu accustomed, try and get Balulu more into the team dynamic and anything like that, the players that you want to keep, and then you try and get the changes going in case you want to replace something else. Overall, I feel like that should be the idea. And probably will work out, probably don't. I don't really care about Immortals, so it's not like I'm going to be sad if they don't perform well enough, but it's fun to see this sort of changes. And now the question is, who gets the spot in IMT Challengers, right?
Yeah, and I will say, by the way, I think it makes a lot of sense for ABO to not play Challengers, whether it's for personal reasons that have been impacting his play, or even just, making the call that, like, hey, I'm having a real bad split for whatever reason, and should probably just step away right now. He didn't look great in Challengers when he subbed in earlier this split, and I think he did look very good subbing into Academy on Golden Guardians last split. Very small sample sizes for both, but I think it's pretty clear that like something's going on this split, and he just does not appear to have it right now.
Exactly. I feel like you could even make the argument that if he goes to Challengers right now, maybe with the level of performance, like, his stocks may go below. So yeah, I think that the best approach is just not do anything. Let people still think that, or still have an idea of your level, and you don't try to ruin it in any other way, because that may end up being worse for your career. So I feel like that's a smart approach as well.
Yeah, I agree. Just take a break, come back, play NACL in summer, or play NACL
Or even next year.
2024 even. Yeah, and that spot will still be there for you as long as you don't go down to NACL and perhaps look worse. Because he looked rough at this level earlier this split, and clearly has got something going on for the time being. He does not look like even as good as he looked in 2022, where I thought he looked worse than he did in 2021. So he could definitely look better than what he's showing right now, and I hope he gets back there. You called it out, though, TDS. Interesting conversation to have here. Who will Immortals challengers get for mid? Because this announcement makes it pretty clear that he's stepping away from competitive for the rest of at least spring. That opens up a roster spot here in the NACL. I know we all watch qualifiers a bit. Anyone have any specific candidates they think are going to be going to Immortals challengers? For me, I think it's going to be either Robbie Bob or Messages. But I want to hear your guys' thoughts.
I don't know. Who's the new mid laner for Team Ambition right now?
Oh, no.
The easy approach, right? But I was actually like trying to look at the teams that like were competing. And it seems like there's a couple of teams that have free agents. Like for example, Team Fish Taco, comp is open. Like no, he's not affiliated to any team right now. Looking at some of the NACL teams, I do think Robbie Bob probably one of the ones that I would look out for. But comp also being open makes sense to me. I would also think about Sotzi from Dojin Tony Top, which I think wasn't a bad performer, and then obviously Messages as well. But the ones that are open are probably the ones that are going to be more attacked, to put it like that, because it's easier to get them, and you don't have to play, like, you just need to be the player. That's it. You don't need to do anything more.
Yeah, that's why I'm big on Robbie Bob, right? Robbie Bob was going to play for UST, University of St. Trevor, not a real university, by the way. Meme team name. Robbie Bob was going to play there after leaving EG Challengers, and that team split up in between OQs 1 and 2, which should leave Robbie Bob wide available. And he also played most of this NACL split, so he's kind of accustomed to the level. I think he's like number one on the list for me. I think Messages is the future. Like, I think he's the most promising and a mid lane prospect available right now, outside of NACL. Yeah, it's pretty uncontested for me that Messages is like in a tier of his own. Beyond that, yeah, I think Sudsy's a decent choice. I think Yunbi could be on people's radars as well, just as somebody with academy experience. And then my last point would be it's Immortals challengers. We've seen them just pluck dudes out of solo queue before, like Vital. If they just pluck a dude out of solo queue and we've never heard of him before, that would also be on brand.
Be way too hilarious. I hope they pull up something like that.
It's just gonna be some name that we've never heard of, and then they're gonna look better than we expect, and then Immortals is still gonna drop them. That's the Immortals Challengers Classic, baby. So I'm here for it.
Build them up to break them down later.
Justice for Vital, man. What happened to Vital? He's not even playing in qualifiers now. It's the weirdest arc, weirdest career. Maybe it's his whole career. I don't know. Maybe he comes back eventually, and there's more chapters to this story. But I know I called it out in episode 1. Like, what is going on? Like, Vital rolls up. He's this no-name straight from solo queue. He plays a split on Immortals Academy. He looks better than expected. He gets dropped, and he's just gone again. Like, that's it. That's the Vital story.
You could argue they were going to immortalize him as that one split player that came and went.
But he wasn't that good.
He appeared once and gone out.
Gordo, this is just adding to the need for you to make a John Boy's Bob emergency style video on people with numbers substituting for letters in their name. Vital, it's just one of those interesting stories out there in the world. You could make something poignant out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's got to be there's a deeper meaning in here somewhere.
I was going to say, maybe we see him next year in Vitality, since they are changing players left and right. Who knows?
Ooh, true. Getting over to Europe. He's not expensive enough to get on Vitality, but he could get there. He could get there. Wow. All right. Well, already pretty lengthy on our first couple of topics here. So let's skip ahead and let's talk about gearing up for the final week. So for anybody who hasn't been keeping track and has been getting themselves carried away here, we got one more week of NACL regular season, and then it's time to get into that big old double elimination bracket. That's going to decide who wins and who gets relegated. 3 games separate ninth place from third place. There is a thick middle ground that contains Golden Guardians, 100 Thieves, Cincinnati Fear, TL Challengers, Wildcard, CLG Challengers, and Flyquest Challengers. Their schedules in these upcoming weeks could really influence what kind of seed they take away. I mean, the difference between being third and ninth is pretty crazy.
Yep.
What are we looking at for this upcoming week? Who do we have our eyes on?
I'm watching both provisional teams, like both Wildcard and Fear, because their weeks are not easy. Like I was watching like their calendars. Fear has 100C and CLGC, which you could argue CLGC is a little bit worse than Wildcard, but then Fear. But at the same time, like that is a matchup that immediately impacts you. So you need to get the best results possible in those two. And 100C, I think, with the improvement that they have shown, are going to be such a tough matchup as well for them. And then when you look at the wildcard, they have TLC and then GGC, a team that has a really good like players that can show up when they need it, particularly APA. And then you have GGC that has been on the rise as well. So it's looking like such an interesting week for those provisional teams, like particularly the ones that are doing good. The teams that are carrying the flair of the provisional teams and the NA amateur scene doing good. And I hope that they are able to perform there because, like you're pointing out, they need to get that higher seed because you don't want to go against the good teams so early on. Particularly DXC, I feel more so DXC than C9C because I think C9C with Diplex is not as scary as DXC in a BO5.
So to just kind of build off of the provisional watch that TDS is starting us on, because it's also my favorite part of the league is watching these provisional teams. I think that as it currently stands, Fear's trending up, Wildcard is trending down, and a lot of it's coming down to the fact that finally people have learned to ban Moose Haters Garen, and he's not looking too hot because of it, not gonna lie. It could just be that these particular matchups were difficult for Wildcard to overcome as a whole in this past week, but they have tough competition going forward. Teams that I think are on the up and up. TL coming back in a big way. Golden Guardians as well. We highlighted them this week. Meanwhile, you look at what Fear is up against. 100 Thieves, they've been off and on. I think that they clearly have the chops to take some big plays and maybe even 2-0 Fear, but they have a lower likelihood of doing so, at least in my eyes, versus Wildcard getting 2-0'd by either TLC or GGC. And then CLG, I think Fear is just better than right now, and barring some kind of upset, I don't see them dropping a huge amount of these final week games, meaning that they will be the king of the provisionals, at least in my eyes.
Yeah, I actually agree there. I think Fear has a good shot up against CLG Challengers and even a good shot up against 100 Thieves Challengers because of the caliber of play they've just shown us these last couple of weeks. I mean, they were able to take a game off Cloud9 Challengers just this past week. They 2-0'd Wildcard. They 2-0'd Fly Challengers back in week 5, right before those guys decided to ascend. And I think that's a really good sign for them coming into this next week. I also think Wildcard have probably one of the tougher schedules. They have to play Golden Guardians Challengers and TL Challengers, both teams that I see as on the upswing. I know the record doesn't really show it for TL, but I actually think, for a team that has had all of the tough competition backloaded, I think one of their best showings was actually just this past week, even though they only went 3-3. Another team that I really do have my eyes on is Flyquest Challengers. I mean, I think this is a team, and obviously it depends on how the rest of the schedule shakes out, but they are 15-11 right now. And they play, I would say, a pretty easy weekend compared to some of the others of Golden Guardians Challengers and Immortals Challengers. I think it's pretty easy for them to 4-0 that, given what they showed this past week. and that can pretty easily put you top 5 based on how the other series this week shake out. So I've got my mark on Fly Challengers. I bet my call of the week is that they end up top 5.
I feel like it's a fair one. Like even 3, even just getting a 3-1, right? Like 1-1 with GGC and then 2-0 puts them in a really, really good spot. Especially because the other matchups like are directly impacting that like overall scoreboard. Because everyone is facing teams that they are going to like take positions off of each other. I think EGC is going to flounder a little bit. I think that this week is going to be really important for them. For example, like putting into context another other couple of teams, and CLGC as well is not going to have an easy week. So like they can pull teams down below that probably weren't expecting. I can see them being top 5 as well. I think TLC, for example, is also going to be another team that will have a little bit of a tough time because of the teams that they are going to be facing. So I honestly think that Flyquest should end up being a top 5 team by the end of the week. If I call the top 5 right now, I think it's pretty much the top 2. That is Cloud9, Digni, and Dignitas. I think Golden Guardian stays there, and I think it's going to be Flyquest and possibly, I think Fear the other top 5. Like I think they pull 100 Thieves down from top 5.
It's a fun call. I like that. We'll also say, our bottom 7 are like hard locked, by the way. It's like because in between Fly Challengers at 9th and Immortals Challengers at 10th, there's a 4-game gap as far as number of wins. Immortals does have a super week to close things out. But if they don't do something crazy like rattle off a 6-0 with their brand new mid laner that they have played no practice with, I'm pretty sure those bottom 7 are hard locked.
But Gordo, what happens to your Balulu socks if that does in fact come to pass? Imagine. We're gonna have such a fun time next week.
They sub in, I think my call is still Robbie Bob. They sub in Robbie Bob, and Robbie Bob from the worse Evil Geniuses Challengers team somehow takes Immortals Challengers to the next level. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not calling it. Maybe if it was messages. They would be able to take that next step up.
Well, actually, IMT goes against EG. So imagine if it is actually Robbie Bob.
he dunks on Ryoma. That would be a fun storyline. I don't think it would happen, but it would be a fun storyline. My Ryoma stocks are still pretty high, man. Like, I think, he lost to APA this week, but I think that's from APA playing super well. I think that speaks more to how well APA did than how well Ryoma did. In my eyes, Ryoma's still playing really well. Maybe I'm just my perspective is tainted because I was high on him in the first place. But I feel like he has still been looking pretty good.
Well, I kind of think that everyone was kind of high on EGC, which leads me to think: do we think that EGC is going to crash and burn in playoffs? Like,
do they get King ever? Like, it's the whole season now, man. King has literally missed the entire season.
Yeah, and funnily enough, I think it's. I'm trying to think of the AD carry. Sorry if I'm blanking on the name.
Mobility.
Mobility. I think Mobility has been one of their better players, all in all.
I agree.
Like, he has been a really consistent AD carry, and for how the season has been going and how it started, like I would be willing to say, even if King doesn't get here, it's not going to be the problem that keeps EGC from improving or being a better team. Like, I think they have issues in other places, and I feel like playoffs may turn out to be disastrous for them. I'm really not sure what is happening with EGC to be so like weird in how they take certain approaches and how they play certain things. And Ryoma hasn't been bad. I think Shading is such an on and off player. So I'm not sure what to say to you. I've been so sad about watching Soul. And Smoothie also feels like it has been so weird this whole split. So it just, like, I don't know what to say about EGC. I had so much hope for them, and it just feels like it's crashing so sadly, or becoming so sad to see.
I do think they're a little better than their record reflects. Like, if I were to power rank the teams, I probably have them above AoE, TSM, and Immortals. And they are below those 3 teams in the standings right now.
Yeah.
That said, they're probably 10th, right? I don't think I have them above, who would be ninth? Wild card, CLG, one of those teams right now. Because, like, the true ninth place holders at the moment are Flyquest challengers, but if I were to power rank these teams, Fly would be higher than ninth. Ninth probably ends up being, like a wild card or a CLG, and that would put, I think EG would probably pretty firmly end up in 10th, which is, that's actually pretty bad for them, all things considered.
Yeah.
That's bottom 3 challengers teams. So yeah, I mean, it's been a rough split for EG. I want to give them a pass for not having King, but as you said, it's not like mobility's the problem, right? But maybe it's just the roster changes have really been hitting them. Also really feels like after that one crazy pop-off week where I gave Shaden Player of the Week, which would have been like week 2, I think, Shaden's been very quiet for the rest of the season since then. Obviously, he draws a lot of bans on carry junglers now because he showed everybody how much he can do. But I don't know, just feels like they haven't been able to replicate that very effectively since Robbie Bob joined the team. And they've been almost without an identity now. Like, they spent so much, and maybe that's literally what happened, right? They spent so much time scrimming these, like, Galio, Lissandra mid comps, with, like, Viego and Kindred and stuff for Shaden, and now and now Ryoma's here and plays more traditional stuff. Not that Ryoma doesn't have a Galio. Ryoma definitely has a Galio, but it's just not the style that their coaching staff wants for them. Yeah, I don't know. Hard to tell. They did also just swap coaches. They just promoted Ido to head coach and dropped they had like some guy that I had never heard of as the coach for a while, right?
That
they
hurts
had
me a lot as well.
Galul was their coach, who is a Tunisian British coach that was in NA Amateur for a while and in EU for a long time before that. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't see anything about this guy before the season. He was head coach from the beginning of the split until February 23rd, at which point he was dropped to promote Ido. So maybe that'll help them out too.
Yeah, could be. I had my much more hopes for EGC, so I wish that they can turn it around and we see more of them in playoffs. My fear is that they just explode in playoffs miserably, and that could affect a lot of the players. So I hope it doesn't happen.
For sure. That's a fair fear. We will see how it goes as we start to get into the postseason. That's probably going to do it for this week. I mean, that was a good hour. Time flew by, but yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. This has been the Salt Mine. We'll be back next week talking about what the playoffs are going to look like, getting some big plans in place for those for that bracket stage, and we'll be back then.
Also, catch Gordo and I this weekend.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, that is also true. TDS and I will be on the Team Ambition stream for NACLQ number 2 this weekend. Nyarko, you will be on the Maryville stream. Am I correct on
I'll
that?
be on the Maryville stream. Bonfire is most likely going to be on the Contingent stream. So make sure to check out, all the hosts. We'll probably keep y'all up to date via Twitter if we have any more developments with some of our other hosts in the far-flung wilds of the internet right now. But yeah, it's gonna be a fun time. These qualifiers were pretty fun to watch, I think. I kind of wish we had some time to wrap up talk about the Maryville versus Dune Tony Top series, but alas, another time for sure.
For sure. And we'll definitely come in when we start talking about promotions. So we will see you guys there. We'll definitely see Maryville there. We'll see what other 3 teams join them. Until then, have yourselves a nice week, and we will see you next time.